Alrighty, welcome all. Cam is here. Retired filmmaker Rob Cohen returns to the show. Welcome.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Always good to be with you. I look forward to it.
Thank you. So we are discussing the complex and just very intriguing independent and critically acclaimed filmmaker John Sayles, who started off collaborating on a few Roger Corman and little-known pictures. He was also known for being the original writer of the rejected original script for E.T. He did some more mainstream movies like The Brother from Another Planet and 8 Men Out. Came up with the script for the Dolph Lundgren war film Men of War before hitting it big with better-known indie films like Return of the Secaucus 7, starring in some of Jonathan Demme's and Spike Lee's works, directing Bruce Springsteen music videos, helming the TV shows The Alienist and Shannon's Dill, and his movie Lone Star is also what got him on the map in '96. People loved his dialogue, but he has also done other indie films like City of Hope, Passion Fish, Limbo, Casa de los Babies, Honey Dripper, Amigo, and most recently Sonora the Devil's Highway. And just one of those other guys who's just known for just doing just a lot of just very intriguing movies that have an independent soul and just really good with just organizing multi-character dramas around a different just scenario. He's very similar to Lawrence Kasdan and Robert Altman, and but I had no idea when looking him up that he also did uncredited rewrites for blockbusters like Mimic and Apollo 13, and that he had so much more acting under his belt. I was just like, wow, I've seen all those movies. I didn't realize that character in the background, like a Matinee or Gridlocked, that was him. What was your introduction to him? I remember he would always come up as being like one of the co-writers of Alligator and Howling. He worked a lot with Joe Dante and some of those other guys, Jonathan Demme, and just had a lot of satirical influence.
I was a film buff from junior high and high school, so I probably just started hearing his name because I remember I probably learned it after seeing something that he was, the writer on Piranha, which I thought was kind of, interesting, like an early credit before he started directing stuff. I remember I knew that early, but I'm guessing that probably the first film that I saw, because I didn't see The Return of the Secaucus 7 early on. So, and I didn't see Brother from Another Planet. So I'm going to have to say, first film I saw was Matewan, and it blew me away, blew my mind. I rewatched it in the last year. It's one of my most favorite movies. So
very nice.
From that point on, and 8 Men Out was, John Cusack. So it had a bigger commercial side to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I definitely remember seeing that. Sports movies aren't necessarily my thing as much. But for me, it was definitely Matewan would have been my introduction to knowing him. And then reading about him would have probably been next because I'm trying to think. Didn't he write a book? I think I had it when I was a kid. Try to see what book he wrote. Hold on a second.
All good.
I just want to make sure I don't say it and it's actually somebody else. Oops. No. All right. Well, we'll see. I'll keep looking.
But yeah, I was kind of like that. I noticed he had written a lot of those creature features. My father had a DVD copy back when DVDs were a thing of 8 Men Out, and I saw Matewan playing on all the movie channels, but I definitely never saw it. So in college, he was just kind of, I did get the chance to see Return of the Secaucus 7 in the college theater as part of a film studies class. And so that was great. I saw that the same time that his little scene thriller film Limbo had come out. But I was just kind of blown away how he was just using so many beloved character actors at the beginning of their careers, like Mary McDonald, Angela Bassett, David Strathairn, again, Joe Morton and Jamie Sheridan. Again, all these guys are commonly used now, but they were, a lot of it is, it's their first few credits. Silver City and Casa de los Babies I've kind of been disappointed by, and yet I don't mind them. That they're definitely watchable, but I need to re-see Lone Star, and I've never seen Men with Guns or The Secret of Roan Irish, but I was fortunate enough to see City of Hope and Passion Fish within these last 3 years recently. They've just been fortunately played on the movie channels. And I definitely like his free-flowing mentality. I still need to see Go For Sisters and Sonora, but and Honey Dripper, but Amigo is one I was fortunate enough to see, which covered the Filipino-American War. And Chris Cooper is another actor who he likes to use in a lot of his work. And again, that guy is just second nature now, because now people know him from movies like American Beauty and Born Identity. But I'm like, yeah, but at the time,
Right.
he was an unknown. And I guess you could say he is an indie darling. He's beloved by so many film buffs, and yet it seems to take a while before people actually get around to seeing a lot of his work, because he doesn't put explosions in his movies, so people just don't see it as much, but which is a shame.
Yeah, they're not genre movies. They're not the typical film geek kind of stuff. There's not comic book stuff. But I did remember, now, you know what it was? Because it was very influential on me when I was a kid. I wanted to be a filmmaker, so I had this book that he wrote, and the title of the book so intrigued me. I was like, I have to have that book. And he wrote
that book.
Yeah, he wrote the book called Thinking in Pictures: The Making of the movie Matewan. So also because it was about Matewan specifically, but he titled it Thinking in Pictures, and about how you do visual thinking and how you frame things. So as a film geek who loved that movie, I was like, oh, here's a book that'll give me the keys to being like a great filmmaker. And I skimmed it and thought it was very cool, but I always thought that book was kind of very cool, especially for the title.
Definitely by the name alone, but in all fairness, like you say, if you're a fan of a movie, you want to get every making of thing that you can get your hands on, and it is wild when it's in book form and not on a disc or in this day and age streaming. Did you ever see the? Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Did I ever see what?
Did you ever see the movie Sunshine State?
No, I have not seen.
So that was wild, because that was one that I saw so often at the video stores.
Mm-hmm.
It used a lot of his same actors that he commonly uses, like Mary Sternbergen, Gordon Clapp, and even I was going to see it eventually because it had Eddie Falco and other TV actors like James McDaniel in it. But it's so funny is that was another one I just saw within, I think, the last 5 years on Stars or FX or whatever. And it's interesting how when people bring up indie filmmakers, they often go and talk about anyone from Robert Rodriguez to and there's so many others. They'll talk about people who literally would just make movies dirt cheap, but after a while kind of not give back to anything. And he's interesting in that he helps out a lot of other big indie guys. Like he helps fund their documentaries. He does rewrites for big budget blockbusters, and then goes back and does his own thing. And then helps out with 5 other indie projects. There's a bunch of special things too. He just seems like such a cool guy who's been doing this so damn long.
Well, this may sound a little ridiculous and I'm being playful, but he's like a rugged, good-looking guy. He's got that kind of that Hemingway kind of like jack of all trades. I'm a writer, I'm an editor, I'm a soundtrack guy, I can do script doctoring, I can act. He's got a little of that. See me and my brain farts. Here's the thing. Here's what we're going to do. When I can't think of something, even though I know, I'll just tell you the cue and you'll just give me the name because it's super easy. The rugged actor who was also a playwright who was married to Jessica Lange.
Oh, Sam Shepard.
Sam Shepard. Yeah, he's got a Sam Shepard quality to him.
You're not far off. He does kind of have kind of a playwright mentality. He just goes home.
He's got that rugged kind of Western, independent, creative artist, thinker type thing about him. And, his movies don't betray that either. He doesn't write simple, stories that just have a beginning and a middle and an end. They're always multi-layered, complex stories that have not just one plot line, but multiple things happening on different levels. I read a quote he had, I can't remember about which film it was, where he was talking about how the film was marketed as just being, this kind of, whatever that film was marketed as a crime drama or about a romance. And he said, look, that's just typical for my movies. There's so many threads and they don't boil down to two sentences the way a lot of movies do. So
right.
He doesn't take exception to the fact that the studio is just going to pick the one thing that's going to get the most, butts in the seats. And, I think that's accurate. He writes very, I don't know if they're very complex, but he writes interwoven stories that are about exploring things on multiple levels, and they're not just simple two-sentence premises.
That's a good way of putting it, because it isn't. He doesn't go on a crazy plot twist in the last 20 minutes. He's not, and he doesn't really have a gimmick so much as just a scenario, and he writes around it. And what he finds interesting, he's pretty good at elaborating upon that and making it intriguing to many. And some of these movies that he's done screenplays for, it's just even more interesting just seeing that he has no problem with the fact that it might vary or not come out the way he wanted it, but he's cool with that, and that it can be just whatever. And it's like, yeah, I did my part, you do your part.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe we should, because it's such an influential and important film, maybe we should start at the beginning with his directing work, at least, and talk about Return of the Secaucus 7.
Oh, yeah. And this is another one. It's not easy to sum up. It's kind of more of a, I don't want to say experimental, but yeah, it's just like 7 college buddies just getting together and just kind of, it's reflecting a lot of just what was happening, I guess, post-Vietnam, just people were going around to rallies and sometimes they're getting out of control. And he's kind of just good at just kind of putting you just kind of in the lens of these various characters. And it's very John Cassavetes-esque, where you just feel like everyone's having an authentic conversation. You don't know where it's going, but you're all the way intrigued because you feel like you're watching, leaning in on, he doesn't make it so much voyeuristic as he does just interwoven.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you legit feel like you are just along for the ride and hearing this entire conversation.
Right. Yeah, I saw there was a review by Roger Ebert about Brother from Another Planet that said that, the movie's told in vignettes, but they hold up, and most of them are amusing or highlight things that are interesting to watch. And I think that's true of Return of the Secaucus 7. It's like watching a mosaic. There are these little colored tiles that are just, you cut between them, you cut around them. I definitely was thinking there was a Cassavetes element, but also, the Altman element, with all these different things just being what they're like tapestries, or they're like mosaics. He's weaving this thing together to tell the whole story more than just having any individual through line. And it's giving you the atmosphere and the feeling and the energy of these characters and who they are and where they are in their lives. And I love it for that. I think it's groundbreaking in those terms, and why the movie is preserved as a historical document and as a slice of life as well. But it's interesting, the thing that drew me to that movie early on, and I talk sometimes like in absolutes, but I'm mostly just pontificating to be playful. But the thing that I've had since I was in college was my hatred of the film The Big Chill. And the thing I hate about The Big Chill is, although it's similar, and in many cases you could say it's either a riff or a ripoff of
college cinematic universe.
Or influenced by it, took the idea from it, whatever, or whatever, it's its own thing. But that movie is so tight and so well done, and it's got all the great music, so it grabs you, and it's got all the big actors. But the thing that happens in that movie that I resent, just I indulge my own personal whims, is that the end of that movie justifies the fact that all of those characters sold out their 60s idealism, and it's okay that they did that because now they're grown-ups in modern life and jobs, and we have to be mature now. And I thought it was disgusting.
Yeah, I don't know if he thought that way, or he just figured that's the only way the story ends, or if the studios were like, we don't like that rebellious stuff, you gotta change a few things.
I'm just about Kasdan's Big Chill. I mean, the whole movie.
Oh, okay.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about The Big Chill.
That movie kind of ends, but yeah.
And yeah, that whole movie is like, look at us, and how we used to be idealists, but now we aren't anymore because we sell sneakers or whatever we do. And isn't it cute? We still have our nostalgic music, but we've moved on. And I always felt that was kind of disingenuous and an unfair dig at the value of people's ideals. And the nice thing about The Return of the Secaucus 7 is you're dealing with the same sort of plot setup, where you have these kids who were rebels and got arrested for wanting to go to promote protests over and over again in some cases, or all of them got busted at one point and were in jail together, and that's how they get their nickname, the Secaucus 7. But there's not any of that heavy-handed moralizing almost in any of Sayles' films. It's much more like, who are these characters? What are they about? How have they shifted, without some big universal grand statement of what we should think about them or how we should judge them. And that's why Sayles films are just more poetic than most movies.
Very well said, because there's so many other people who, I don't know, they almost kind of remind me like some of these infamous creators of TV shows where they're just all about taking the credit, but kind of don't share the, applauding their crew. And I think Sayles is just so good at just utilizing everybody, getting some great shots that do actually tell a story, and the multi-character stuff doesn't feel overplotted or just way too long for its own good. He's doing stuff that's just every kind of thing. Someone having to do a legal medical procedure, trying to do a get rich quick scheme, living during a chaotic period in any part of history, either American or foreign. And he's good at, like you say, just concluding it and and never feeling like he owes so much to some other kind of filmmaker. And the characters are all just part of one giant voice, as opposed to feeling like too many people in the room and one of them's got to leave in order for the story to just end.
Yep. Yep.
And clearly there's something in his material that has worked for every kind of generation. And I just find it kind of just sad that whenever everyone's talking about indie pictures, they kind of go to just, oh, Paul Thomas Anderson, or just some other guy who made a WTF-esque mystery or horror movie. And it's like there are so many other indie people who've been working here since the beginning of time, guys. Should check them out.
Who actually, work much more within a traditional indie frame than Paul Thomas Anderson, who has a tremendous amount of studio support behind him.
Paul and Wes and all those guys are kind of they're going to get backing and plenty of accolade nominations. And John, I don't think he cares about awards. He just wants to make a good story. And even the two movies I mentioned that I didn't think from 03 and 04 that I didn't think were great, I still did not regret watching. They were still very atypical characterizations. And
we'll have to come back to Casa de los Babies, because I just watched it this morning and I liked it. I liked it quite well.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, so why do you think all the other actors latch onto his stuff? Because some of it could easily be argued as being kind of like a stage play, and then there's just something else about it where I guess you could say they're just unusual dramas, I guess.
I would probably say he's an actor's director and writer. He's somebody that actors would like to work with because he writes exploration of character, and he has that Cassavetes independent exploratory quality to the work. I don't know how much he works directly off the script versus improvisation, but I would think more, because he's such a great writer. And so actors love good writing and good parts. And from early on, he's sort of been that ensemble kind of director, like Altman and other people, where they have that, or even Kasdan, where they have that core group of actors early on, or Scorsese, core group of actors you work with early on, and then they become big and famous. But when you start out that way and you've helped those actors develop into becoming famous, you're clearly the kind of person that actors, recognize as being somebody that it's valuable to work with. And the movies are proof in the pudding that, these aren't just special effects extravaganzas. They're character studies where actors get something to sink their teeth into. And I think that's going to be very appealing for them to want to work with him.
Totally. And he does make good use of all the roles. I don't ever think of one where I'm like, why is this actor in here? He's taken just people who have, again, I guess must have always been on the theater scene or Broadway scene, because there's so many of them where I'll look at them and they're like, oh man, that star, I didn't realize they were in this. And that was a hell of a good performance, because the character felt real and even different from what they typically portray.
You just reminded me when you made the comparison to, somebody who writes in a theatrical way or in a way that's related to plays. There's that fundamental rule of cinema that people talk about all the time, which is, you show, you don't tell. And that's clearly what Sayles is doing all the time with his characters. They don't just pontificate or tell you in any overt way what you should think. They reveal it. And that's got to be great for actors. They're constantly being written to just reveal elements of their personality and who they are, and then the audience gets to just explore that and figure out what it means to them without being told exactly, over your head what it means.
Totally. Without being trivial or giving too much away, and his shots aren't. I can't think of any of his movies that are based on having a very giant signature style. So I think that is like his main signature. Just characters just get together and they just reveal something, and it just keeps building up and up until there's nothing more to reveal. And
Yeah, exactly. So you know what? That kind of makes me think of Mate One, because I've been trying to think of how to talk about it. So for me, that's the central movie of his career that and it's the central movie in my life in terms of favorite movies. And there's so many things that work in that movie, but let's just pick it up from what you just said, which is that you have a movie that's basically about true events, and the true events culminate, as the film does, with a tragedy. So many times when you have a film with a tragedy, say like the assassination of Gandhi, you need to put that up front because everyone knows it happened. So it happens
yeah,
in the film.
here's the story of how it came to happen.
Right. And in a sense, that is what Mate One is, but he doesn't need to put it up front. The massacre is going to happen at the end, but by the time you get to the massacre just breaks open everything you've seen in the struggles of these characters. There's definitely good versus evil in that movie, and it's clearly the corporate, business side is on the evil side and the union fighters are on the good side. But when that massacre happens at the end, instead of just being some kind of anticlimax or like, oh, well, everything just blew up, it just leaves you feeling the deeper pain and the deeper investment and the deeper passion of all the characters that fought their way to get something accomplished in their lives that ended up tragically unfolding in that kind of bloodshed. And again, it's a very poetic kind of silent ending, but I just think structurally it's brilliant. And what you just said just kind of reminded me of it, that he can just present that and then let you just leave with the emotional weight of it.
Yeah, very true. Because I mean, Richard Attenborough basically, there's another guy who, much like David Lean, would want to make a giant epic, but would want to make it be structured around the drama as opposed to when's the next battle sequence going to happen, even though there would be some battles in his movies on occasion. But I mean, Jeff Nichols, I think, is probably one of the few people who kind of has a similar style to John Sayles. You've seen a lot of his movies like Loving, Mud, and Shotgun Stories. He's all about see a character kind of finds out something unusual about their inner self. That's pretty much his main style. And Sayles definitely has characters revealing more about themselves, if not entirely changing by movie's end. And it's never about, wow, that was a good performance, but there wasn't anything else to that, low budget movie that played at the Angelica Theater in your area. It's like, no, there's a lot to latch onto and really digest.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's some, and eventually you're gonna see a lot of his movies anyway, just because all these actors that are in his movies. I mean, even City of Hope alone, you're going to probably see if you're a fan of some of the supporting actors like Tom Wright, Gina Gershon, Tony Dennison, Frankie Faison, I think is also in there. And well, like you said, I mean, Attenborough with Gandhi and some of those other filmmakers at that time were just so good at building up to, is like, how this will end, but here's how it began, and here's how we latch you in, here's how we get you in to where you're so distracted by the story you forget how it's actually going to end after a while. You're so invested, but you don't feel ripped off or like, well, bummer. What I'd see.
And it's a totally legitimate way to go. I think Attenborough is a great director and Gandhi's a freaking amazing movie, but it's just a different approach. Like you don't need to I mean, it's so painful to say, here's our hero that we explore for this whole movie, and then at the end he just gets killed. I mean, it's so painful. but yet Sayles takes it. He's like, you know what? These are characters we're all going to, really grow to care about. And in the end, this massacre is going to actually just add a lot of weight to how much their struggle cost and what it meant to be so invested in something they cared about so passionately.
Totally. And I think David Fincher could probably do the equivalent of what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, even though he's theatrically well known, he's mainly known for his dark character studies. And it seems like, unfortunately, we're getting a little more ADD with every generation, where now everyone wants to know what the shocking ending of a M. Night Shyamalan movie or Christopher Nolan blockbuster that just came out is like, instead of actually discussing if they actually liked it or not, and debating endlessly. And it's just like, see, don't you're being just as bad as the various clickbait sites. Why not just say, I loved or did not like that movie, I'm thinking about it still, so clearly it made some kind of impression. And unfortunately, I mean, I think Sayles, having worked so long in the industry, just knew he was going to have competition. And I think he just, from what other interviews I've seen, he just seems to just always just say, hey, I know what I want to tell the minute I do it. There's an audience for everything. If Woody Allen can do stories about people who grow up living in New York with, family members and love interests, then I can do a movie about 5 people in this one inner city who live together, just like Oliver Stone can do a politically charged movie about a crime scandal, or if Spike Lee can do a movie that's a commentary on a hard to talk about subject. I can do my own take on, hey, here's this Depression era biopic, and here's probably how someone probably lived day to day, talked and felt growing up. And I think also a lot of these actors who he's worked with have also, as a result, they kind of based a lot of their career around it. They started looking for a lot of that same type of scripting, especially with David Strathairn and Angela Bassett. They always seem to go for a giant ensemble piece instead of worrying about, can I be the next Julia Roberts or Tom Cruise?
Right.
And carry a movie and be the giant magnet that makes everyone, come into the theater.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, it's also just interesting, like you say, how diverse he is. He's making fun of politics in Silver City and Casa de los Babies. He's talking about, some, a baby adopting service, and a bunch of gals with a lot of time on their hands. And Matt Wan, again, is bringing up just some great themes about work unions. And Secaucus 7 is, again, when it's not talking about college, it's also talking about just kind of the angst and what everyone's feeling. It's not exactly like political, but it's also kind of just a natural, heartfelt kind of everyday kind of scenario movie. And unfortunately, I will see a lot of other indie films that kind of have a similar plotting, but half the time they'll either have a lot of ad-libbing or just be even more looser in their story, to where all you really take away from it is, hey, there's that one actor who was really good at it. And he doesn't really feel like any of his actors are out of place, or that if one of them leaves the movie, the whole thing doesn't work.
We'll return after these messages.
If you like small-town mystery, crazy news, and wild history, then the Florida Men on Florida Man podcast is for you. Each week, Josh Mills and Wayne McCarty bring you the absolute best Florida has to offer. So if you're looking for a show that's safe for the family, but funny enough to help you escape everyday life, then listen to the Florida Men on Florida Man podcast. That's Florida Men, plural, on Florida Man podcast.
Hey, it's Brent Pope, the host of Breakfast with Brent Pope. You've seen me on some of your favorite TV shows saying things like, "Give it up, Jimmy. You got to sink this putt to win." On Breakfast with Brent Pope, I sit down with guests from the entertainment world, and we do it all over breakfast. Or should I say Brentfast? Every week on Brentfast, you get inside Hollywood info and tips, great breakfast recs and foodie debates. Most of all, you get the most delightful 30 minutes of your week. So dig in. It's Brentfast time. Listen at Brentfast.com, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found.
The Jacked Up Review Show podcast is honored to be part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Join anytime, talk the talk, and enjoy yourselves. There's something enlightening for everyone with this crowd of cool cats. Check them out.
A lot of his movies are like even barely 2 hours. So I guess he knows how long he has to make it without. But there's even been times where they have been somewhat longer than 2 hours, and you don't feel like any time's escaping you. Or I definitely don't feel any self-indulgence from his material. I just really just naturally kind of gaze into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gaze into it is a nice term for his movies. There's something that you can just sort of float into. You know, you and I just actually did a little talking about Oliver Stone. And
yeah,
you know, the film of John's that just for me brings that to mind, and then I'll bring up what I think is the broader point was Men with Guns, and so yeah, Men with Guns just sort of reminded me a little bit of that feel of like early Oliver Stone, like Salvador, you know, and I think regardless of what film John is working on, it feels like he's going after something that he wants to dramatize. Like, here's a situation in the world, and how do I create or weave a story that will let people have a window into it? And like you said, we can gaze into it. So with Men with Guns, you know, you get taken into that world. It's not as, I don't mean to say that Oliver Stone's early stuff was heavy-handed, but it's just definitely not as heavy-handed as Oliver Stone. You get taken into these worlds, like say Lone Star or Casa de los Babies. You go into this world, and you suddenly, after Lone Star, you feel like you got more of a sense of Texas than you maybe even wanted to. Like. Even though it's told with subtle things about the characters and their relationships, and you still get this feeling of like, God, what is this universe that these people live in, and the politics of it and the cultural trappings of it really come out dramatically in Lone Star with what, you know, might be, I don't know how many times he does it, but a little bit of a surprise ending at Lone Star that really is a commentary on just the nature of the culture in Texas. And having just watched Casa de los Babies, you know, here's a film that's set up about a group of American women who are staying in a hotel in a South American country, waiting to adopt these poor babies from this other country so they can take them home and, you know, be moms. And yeah, through all that, you have kids on the street who don't have enough to eat, that, you know, they don't have somebody adopting them. And you have the struggles of the people who are providing the accommodations for these women and their frustrations, and people who can't get work. So the whole socioeconomic, cultural, political environment is surrounding a very simple, the structure sets up these characters who are just simple women who are hurting because they are struggling to have families. And yet through the structure, you get revealed a whole bunch of different layers of the infrastructure that affects these kinds of lives. And I think Oliver Stone too sets out with a theme of like, how do I dramatically portray this situation? But Stone does it much more through certain kinds of action, where I think John Sayles does it much more through just these deeper, I'm going to go back to this term again, these colored mosaic tiles of character that when you juxtapose them all, make a much bigger picture and a way of feeling into a situation that you wouldn't have had before you saw the movie. And
good way of putting it, because Stone would definitely base it on casting and everything, and he's more about how do I show the different voices in the room. I mean, I'll even say Tom McCarthy, I think, does a good job of it with The Station Agent and Spotlight. Here's all these different voices, and here's how we, the viewers, sees them and captures it without feeling like one person's getting too much talking over the other, or it's too many voices talking all at once. And it's just the right amount of third person perspective. And and all the three of those movies you just mentioned, like I would always see Men with Guns being played on IFC. I never got the chance to catch it, but it sounds on paper like something like Salvador or Scarface that he might have written, but it's instead just a very provocative tale about how precious life is, and how did some of these people get themselves into this unremarkable, violent filled situation. Casa de los Babies shows many people who are tempted to adopt or want to do this but aren't sure they're ready for motherhood, and among other predicaments. And Lone Star, if you just looking at it, I mean, if you tell anyone about it, they're going to be like, oh, but who's in it? Or it's like, well, it's irrelevant that Chris Christopherson, Elizabeth Pena, Joe Morton, or even a young McConaughey are in it. But what's interesting is that it's basically a current sheriff trying to figure out about the previous administration and some disturbing secrets about his old man. But it's very well told and very eye-opening for what might have sounded on paper like a Walter Hill neo-Western.
Well, yeah, but also then how in a place like Texas, people hide their history, they hide from the truth, and then they end up hiding their own identity from each other. And then to have it just sort of unfold in such a, almost shocking kind of way at the end, really makes a point about the world these characters live in that goes a lot deeper than just, it turned out that these bad guys with guns were trying to stop me from finding out what really happened 30 years ago. And then we fought, and we fought them with guns and we got the truth. And now the truth is revealed, it's done so much more subtly than that.
That even Limbo, same kind of thing, is like you naturally just see this guy and his family. They find a mysterious stranger, and he's like, oh, I think he might be my dad. And it's interesting. So it's kind of like Lone Star, but it does a about face, and I'm getting myself way over my head and about to figure out some stuff that I'm not prepared to even know the answer to, but I want to know more anyway. And it's interesting how he does do thrillers in that they're not based on any violent surprise or who killed who. Like it's all about like exactly what you say. What part of my character am I going to discover, or the audience is going to know, or the audience knows, but now I'm coming to terms with, and all that extra subtext, all that extra layering is so well earned, instead of just feeling like I'm doing some clever wordplay.
Yep. But clearly he knows how to write the other stuff. I mean, if you're going to give him a paycheck, he can crank out a Piranha, a Howling,
rewrite Apollo 13 and
Alligator,
Alligator.
Apollo, if you want me to give you a standard action movie, I can do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Just don't ask me to direct it.
Right. He's made a good living with that. I even do wonder what some of his contributions were to movies like The Mummy or whatever have you.
I'm pretty excited to see. I mean, he hasn't directed a lot of stuff. I mean, 2013 was his last direction, but
I still got to see that one. That involves Edward James Olmos as a guy, and see, it wasn't gonna make Man on Fire or Taken money because it's not supposed to be like those kinds of movies. But yet, anyone who probably looks at that they're gonna probably go, "Oh, that sounds like a violent Western revenge movie." It's like, no. If you know Sayles, he's trying to do kind of, again, like you say, someone discovering something and just kind of soaking it in a more natural, human way, and people who want that get it. And I've never seen anyone bash his work, so that's a relief. It's kind of cool to know that there's an audience for him, instead of feeling like, oh, there's that obscure movie, but it's, it wasn't too noteworthy other than that, how it was shot or acted. And like you say, he is good at just kind of just soaking in these details and adding little just elements of whatever to it. He can make it be a crime picture, he can make it be a period piece or historical drama, or he can make it be a straightforward comedy to some extent. And I think he just altogether just, I mean, because we even mentioned earlier how we're not really all that really into sports movies, but 8 Men Out is just very interesting, how it becomes kind of a boys in the club kind of movie. And then
it wasn't really fair to call 8 Men Out a sports movie. I mean,
right, it was marketed as that, but it's not really.
Yeah,
it even ends with a courtroom, but it's not done even like a typical courtroom, really. It's like everyone's got a statement to basically share. And
yeah, in a sense, it is very much the same thing. Here are a bunch of characters who are presenting an image of what we think the culture is supposed to look like, but behind the scenes, there's some corruption going on, and the underbelly of what really is going on and what it says about what's really happening with the culture in these characters gets revealed through, exploring the characters again. And that's why he's so good at what he does.
1000%. And I would hire him just like in a heartbeat, just if I just knew he could just make something that would be just so well interconnected. It could be a movie about gambling, it could be a movie about someone dealing with a personal loss.
I'd hire him to write anything, but I don't think he should direct anything but his own stuff. I think he's a director who wouldn't be interested in
No, he wouldn't. I'm just saying.
Yeah, if he's gonna direct a movie, which clearly takes a lot of time and effort, he's going to do it on something that really is personally of interest to him. And every single movie he's directed meets that criterion. Now, the scripts can be all over the place because they're for other people, which I was really surprised when I looked up to see his credits. He's in pre-production on a script for a Django movie called Django Lives. Looks like,
really?
Yeah, based on the old Italian kind of like spaghetti Western Django movies, which to me sounds really exciting. I think that would be awesome. So let's see how.
Yeah, and we're cool with him just kind of just surprising us. There's other people who, I don't know, we become so accustomed to what their signature style is, or when they have that lackluster period that most filmmakers tend to go through. Mm-hmm. He's always a pleasant surprise, so we want him to keep surprising us, because he doesn't stick to really any kind of formula or setting, or even the same actors. Even after a while, he's used so many actors lately who have been working since the 70s and who technically don't even need to work, but I think he goes for those kinds of types of actors too, who are looking for something to do that isn't a superhero or Oscar bait movie. They want something that's like, yeah, I totally got it in me to help you tell that story. There's something to this that sticks, that glues people.
Yeah. And look at this. I didn't notice. I just noticed he has. He's written at least one novel. He's written short story collections.
That makes sense, because there is this one obscure like movie that I think played a few times on TV that he was like one of three people, and it dealt with like anthologies that weren't really connected, but kind of dealt with, again, just everyday kind of people situations like child custody, police victims. It was interesting how he can kind of insert himself into any kind of situation, and he finds something to gravitate towards that he's invested in, and we the viewer are follow him along because it just feels just so naturally compelling. It's
and he it's a variation on what I was saying before about the mosaic, but a lot of creators, you know, they use their art to just speak for themselves through the different elements. He clearly has an ear and can find all the voices for these different characters and let these people be unique and individual and have their own personalities that aren't just all variations on him. Like he can really, you know, pull those different colored mosaic tiles together and let them be themselves. And, you know, as a writer, that's great when you have somebody who can really give voice to all the different characters and let them stand, you know, individually for themselves. And
without too many cooks in the kitchen, like you say, and most people like him would probably have been like, oh, I gotta adapt my buddy's work, but you know.
Let's get 10 more writers in the writer's room. But
and he even is almost kind of like Robert Town, you know. Town has made a career out of being the #1 script doctor and then kind of going about and doing his own kind of 40s inspired noir tribute, and to some degrees of success. And it is interesting how like Men of War is like one of the few movies that, even though he did not direct it, it's like the only movie of his that like is argued as having his voice, because even the people in it are all just of different degrees. Some of them are totally the same type of actors who were working with him on other projects, and they just stuck with it even though he didn't have time to direct it. But I like it because it's just, instead of being a bizarre or over the top, you know, action movie, it's just kind of an interesting tell on what is it like to be a mercenary and just go on unusual adventures. You know, people of course saw the cover, and so they thought, oh, it's a Dolph Lundgren movie, and it's like, no, it's really not even a Dolph Lundgren movie. He just happens to be in it.
Yeah, that's nice.
Right.
I'm going to go see a movie that Dolph Lundgren is just in, and it's not a Dolph Lundgren movie. All right, that's interesting. Really more interesting than going to see a Dolph Lundgren movie. He just happens to be in it.
He happens to be in it. It's also just kind of, I can't think of any roles that these actors have played since that is anything like it, and what they've done in any of their movies. And I also just like how there's never a feel for, like you say, for him to be heavy-handed or just too trigger happy with certain themes. He never and when his movies end, you never see really the ending coming. And when it does happen, you're just like, wow, I kind of want to know a little more about this and that, because again, those characterizations were just so intriguing as opposed to polarizing and, you know, dull and made you want the movie to conclude. Passion Fish, I was just so fortunate to see, and, you know, on paper that sounds like kind of a silly, what could have been a slogfest, you know, a soap opera actress becomes disabled and has to get closer to a bunch of caretakers. Well, it ends up being a very electrifying character study with, you know, I was going to see it anyway because I heard about it, starring Mary McDonnell and Alfred Woodard, but it's like, this is just so much more to this. This is like living the rest of your life in an atypical way, finding all kinds of friends you would have otherwise never made or had, it doesn't feel. It's so funny how she's playing a soap opera actress, but yet there's only hints here and there of what it would be like to be a famous person instead of.
You've intrigued me because it's like just a hilarious little aside.
It does sound fun. It's very uncanny, that is for sure, because anyone else would have probably done a movie within a movie, or I don't know, maybe a.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm intrigued, because the personal side note is that one of the first movies I ever worked crew on was Soap Dish with.
Oh, nice.
So
wow.
That's a broad comedy about soap opera, and so I was like, oh, maybe it'd be fun to see a more John Sayles take on the reality of a soap opera character than that goofy broad comedy that I worked on all that time ago. Back in the day, by when I say work on, I was an assistant location manager in New York City for a few years.
Hey,
worked on crews in the city.
It's a credit. In the city.
In the city, back when I lived there.
I'm in the city today.
Yeah. So you know what? Whatever we do when we're talking about these things, one thing I do sort of feel like is kind of fun is to, we're talking about these people and why we think they're important and what their contributions are. But I also think for anybody who's listening, it's kind of a good thing to sort of get, that we're recommending these people to you on a certain level, except when I say, ooh, I hate that, but then you can watch it anyway, because I'm just opinionated. But if we're really recommending something, I mean, I hope that a discussion like this would be just like, yeah, check out some John Sayles if you really love filmmaking.
That's what we're hoping for, as opposed to he's so amazing, you got to sign up to the streaming platform now within 20 days. No, just check him out. You're bound to. I can't think of anyone who doesn't have at least one film buff friend who is a huge like of interest in Sayles' filmography. And like some of these guys, you've inevitably seen one of his movies at one time on cable TV. One of them got through eventually.
Yeah, but I would say it's very easy for the vast majority of film buffs. Like when I went to film school, most of the kids I went to school with, and even to this day, most film buffs I know, they're film buffs for Gremlins and Indiana Jones and Jaws and all that kind of stuff. And it isn't every film person that's gonna, even if they know and respect Sayles, it's somebody who's going to be a little more thoughtful, somebody who's interested in something a little bit more poetic, and yet still grounded and meaningful. So if you're looking for something a little richer, John is definitely somebody you should check out.
1000%.
1000%. Damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it. That's right.
That's right. Thank you for being on here, Johnny Boy Cohen.
Yeah. It's good to be with you as always. I enjoy the chance to chat with you, my friend.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about as many of these filmmakers who don't even really get talked about, who many beloved him, but yet.
And I'm impressed with how many of his movies you've seen. You are a very completist film.
Still got to see Men with Guns. I promise I'll see it.
Yeah, all right. I'll get back to you about watching the soap opera one too.
Passion Fish. That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on here, and good recovery.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was a little under the weather, but I'm feeling better.
Even better.
See you next time.
Anytime.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up